The translator device fell silent for 3 full seconds after High Commander Dravik finished speaking. Every species in the Galactic Assembly Hall understood his words perfectly. They simply could not believe them. Ambassador Yuki Okonkwo sat in humanity's small section of the massive hall. Around her, representatives from over 200 species watched with expressions ranging from pity to cold satisfaction. Humanity had been part of galactic society for only 87 years. They were children here. And children, in the galaxy's long history, did not survive when empires came calling. Dravik stood at the central podium, his scaled body towering over 3 meters tall. Behind him, holographic images showed the Solaran Dominion's fleet. 800 warships, 40 conquered star systems, 17 species that had chosen to surrender, and 12 more that had chosen to fight and no longer existed. 30 standard cycles, Dravik repeated, his voice carrying easily through the hall. Your species will transfer all territorial claims to the Dominion. Your fleet will stand down. Your leaders will present themselves for judgment. This is not a negotiation. This is a notice. The assembly remained silent. No one spoke for humanity. No one ever did. When the Dominion chose its next target, Yuki pressed a small button on her console, requesting the floor. A ripple of surprise moved through the hall. Most species did not respond to Dominion ultimatums. They simply started running. The chair recognizes the human delegate, the assembly speaker announced, sounding almost confused. Yuki stood slowly. She was 58 years old, with gray streaking her dark hair. She had spent 30 years as a crisis negotiator before taking this post. She had talked warlords down from massacres. She had negotiated with terrorists who held children. She had never once shown fear, because fear made you weak, and weakness got people killed. High Commander, she said, her voice calm and clear. I want to make sure I understood correctly. You are threatening to destroy humanity if we do not surrender ourselves to your empire. Is that accurate? Dravik's reptilian face twisted into something like amusement. Your understanding is correct, human. I see. Yuki nodded once. Then my response is simple. No. The silence that followed was different from before. This was the silence of hundreds of species trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Dravik laughed. It was a harsh, rattling sound. You do not seem to understand your situation. Perhaps your translators are malfunctioning. My translators work perfectly, Yuki replied. I said no. Humanity does not surrender. We do not transfer our people to foreign powers. And we do not respond well to threats against our children. She paused. But I thank you for making your intentions clear. It saves us time. She typed a short message on her console. 3 words in an old code that every human ship, station, and colony had been programmed to recognize since the day humanity first left Earth. Protocol Defiance. Across human space, alerts began to sound. Civilian ships received orders to proceed to safe zones. Military vessels broke from their standard patrols and moved to predetermined positions. Planetary defense systems came online. Orbital weapons platforms powered up. And in hidden shipyards throughout the outer solar system, crews began final preparations on projects that had been building for decades. All of this happened within 4 minutes of Yuki sending her message. Counselor Prill, a small bird-like Fenari who had been one of humanity's few friends in the assembly, watched this with wide eyes. Like everyone else, he could see the communications traffic spiking on the galactic network. He could see human assets moving with perfect coordination across dozens of light years. How are they doing that? Someone whispered. Their empire is barely 100 light years across. Command signals should take hours to reach their outer colonies. But Yuki just smiled. The truth was that humans had never trusted the galaxy's peace. From the moment they had met other species, they had been preparing for this day. Redundant communication systems, automated response protocols, hidden resources. Because humans had learned something from their own bloody history that other species seemed to have forgotten. Peace was wonderful. But peace without the strength to defend it was just a delayed surrender. Dravik's amusement faded as reports reached him. What are you doing? Your ships are not retreating to defensive positions. They are spreading out. Yes, Yuki agreed. They are. You cannot fight us. Our fleet outnumbers yours 4-1. Probably true. Then what? Dravik demanded. Why choose extinction? Yuki gathered her materials, preparing to leave. She had done what she came to do. Now it was time for others to take over. High Commander, she said, pausing at the door. My species evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, and predators that wanted to eat us. We survived ourselves. We fought our way to the top of a food chain that included nothing but murder, and we did it without claws or fangs or scales. Just our minds and our stubborn refusal to die. She looked back at him, and for the first time, her calm expression showed something else underneath. Not fear. Something harder. You asked why we won't surrender. The answer is simple. We're humans. Surrender isn't something we know how to do. She walked out of the assembly hall, leaving Dravik staring at the empty doorway. Counselor Prill quietly began calculating the fastest route to human space. Something told him he needed to see what came next. The war had just begun. 17 different news networks broadcast the same prediction within hours of the assembly confrontation. Humanity would fall in days, perhaps weeks, if they were stubborn. The only question was how many would die before they accepted reality. Across the galaxy, species watched their screens with a mixture of curiosity and pity. Some had seen this before. The Dominion would arrive with overwhelming force. The target species would fight briefly, realize the hopelessness of their situation, and surrender. Those who did not surrender simply ceased to exist. It was almost boring in its predictability. Speaker Morith was old, even by Solaran standards. His scales had faded to pale gray, and his movements were slow and careful. He had served the Dominion for over a century, advising 6 different high commanders. He had watched them conquer system after system, species after species. He knew how this story always ended. And yet something about this one bothered him. He stood before High Commander Dravik in the War Council chamber, a data pad clutched in his aged hands. I have compiled a report on human history, Commander. I believe you should review it before we proceed. Dravik barely glanced at him. Why? They are a young species with a small fleet. The outcome is certain. That is what concerns me. Morith activated the display, showing images from human history. Wars. Endless wars. Humans fighting each other with sticks and stones, then swords and spears, then guns and bombs and weapons that could destroy entire cities. They have been at war with themselves for their entire existence. They have developed more methods of killing than any species we have ever encountered. Fighting each other is not the same as fighting us. No, Morith agreed. But look at this. He showed another set of images. Humans surviving ice ages by adapting their behavior. Humans rebuilding after earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. Humans persisting through plagues that killed millions. Their world tried to destroy them repeatedly. They refused to die. They have a word for it. Stubbornness. But I do not think that word captures what it truly means. Dravik waved a dismissive hand. Surviving natural disasters is not the same as surviving our fleet. Morith lowered his head respectfully. As you say, Commander. But he did not delete the report. Something told him it would be needed. Far away, in the space station that served as humanity's military command center, Admiral Ravi Anand was holding a very different kind of meeting. The Dominion expects us to form defensive lines around our core worlds, he explained to his senior officers. They expect us to protect Earth and our major colonies while sacrificing the outer territories. That is what every other species has done. And that is what they will prepare for, said Lieutenant Amara Diallo, a young tactical officer who had spent 5 years studying Dominion battle tactics. They move in formation, crush the defense, and advance to the next target. It works because their targets are predictable. Exactly. Anand smiled. So we will not be predictable. He activated a holographic map showing human space. But instead of concentrated defense points, it showed human assets spreading outward, scattering like seeds in the wind. We call this the Hornet Protocol, Anand explained. Small, fast ships working in coordinated groups. They strike at weak points, retreat before the enemy can respond, and strike again somewhere else. We do not try to hold territory. We make them bleed for every light year they advance. They outnumber us significantly, one officer noted. They do, which is why we have been preparing other surprises. Anand changed the display, showing dozens of asteroids scattered throughout the outer solar system. The sleeping giants. Mobile weapons platforms disguised as natural debris. They have been waiting for 40 years. 40 years. Another officer looked stunned. We started building weapons against the Dominion before most of our fleet was even designed. We started building weapons against any threat the moment we realized we were not alone. Anand's expression was calm, but serious. Humans have a long memory. We remember what happens to species that trust too much in peace. So we smiled and made friends and traded with the galaxy. And every single year, we prepared for the day someone would decide we were easier to conquer than befriend. That day had arrived. The first Dominion scout fleet crossed into human space 2 days later. 12 ships, sent to test the defenses and report back. They found a single human vessel waiting for them at the border. The small ship broadcast a message on all channels. Music first, something ancient that humans called rock and roll, with heavy drums and screaming guitars. Then words. You have entered human space. This is your only warning. Leave now, or we will teach you why nothing on our world wanted us to survive. The scout commander laughed and gave the order to fire. The human ship exploded, so did 6 Dominion vessels caught in the blast. It was a suicide ship, loaded with antimatter and designed to look like an easy target. The survivors of the scout fleet stared at the expanding debris cloud in shock. No species had ever greeted them with a trap. No species had ever sacrificed themselves so willingly just to send a message. Back in the command center, Anand received the report and nodded slowly. Now they know, he said quietly. Now they understand what kind of enemy they have chosen. We do not fight for victory. We fight because the alternative is unacceptable. And we will spend every life if that is what it takes to remain free. The galaxy had expected humanity to beg. They were beginning to realize how wrong they were. The colony of Sentinel's Gate had been humanity's first step into deep space. For 50 years, its cities had grown across 3 continents, home to 12 million people who had built new lives among alien stars. Gardens bloomed where there had been nothing but rock. Children played in streets their grandparents had paved. Now those streets were empty. The gardens were silent. Every single civilian had been evacuated in the 6 days since the Dominion's ultimatum. High Commander Dravik arrived with 800 warships, expecting to find desperate defenders huddled around their precious colony. Instead, he found a graveyard of automated systems and cold, abandoned buildings. They fled, one of his officers reported with satisfaction. Typical prey behavior. But Dravik was not so certain. He had studied the reports from the scout fleet. Humans did not run. They had proven that with their suicide trap. So why would they abandon their first colony without a fight? The answer came 30 seconds later. The asteroids around Sentinel's Gate came alive. Weapons platforms hidden in the rocks powered up simultaneously, filling space with crossfire. The sleeping giants that Admiral Anand had described were not defensive positions. They were kill zones that Dravik's fleet scattered as explosions tore through their formation. Ships that had flown together for decades suddenly found themselves fighting alone, cut off from their neighbors by fields of debris and weapons fire. All ships, regroup on my position, Dravik commanded. But regrouping was exactly what the humans wanted. Captain Bayo Mensa watched the Dominion ships from the bridge of her destroyer, the Swift Vengeance. Her vessel was small compared to the massive Dominion warships. Fast, lightly armored, designed for hit-and-run attacks rather than direct confrontation. Hornet Squadron 3, you are clear to engage, she said into her communicator. Remember the rules. Strike fast, disappear, never stay in one place. 12 destroyers launched from concealment behind a dead moon and streaked toward the confused Dominion fleet. They fired their weapons in coordinated bursts, targeting engines and communication arrays rather than hulls. They did not try to destroy ships. They tried to blind and cripple them. Then they vanished, jumping away before the Dominion could return fire. What kind of tactics are these? A Dominion commander demanded over the open channel. They fight like insects. Hornets, Mensa muttered, allowing herself a small smile. We fight like hornets. Dr. Ingrid Holm was not a soldier. She was a physicist who had spent 30 years developing communication systems. Her contribution to the war effort was invisible to most, but it was about to change everything. Activate the dampening field. She ordered from her position on a hidden station near the system's edge that a pulse of energy swept through the battle zone. To human eyes, nothing changed, but the Dominion fleet suddenly went silent. Their faster-than-light communication systems, which allowed them to coordinate across the entire formation, simply stopped working. For the first time in their history, Dominion ships could not hear their commanders. The effect was immediate and devastating. Without central coordination, each Dominion captain had to make independent decisions. Some charged forward. Others fell back. Some fired at human ships. Others accidentally hit their own allies in the confusion. Pilot Rosa Gutierrez led her interceptor squadron directly into the chaos. Her ships were tiny compared to the massive warships around them, barely larger than escape pods. But their size was their advantage. Stay inside their formation, she ordered her pilots. They cannot hit us without hitting each other. She was right. The Dominion ships tried to target the human interceptors, but found themselves unable to fire without striking their own vessels. When they did fire, they often missed the small, fast targets and hit their neighbors instead. In the center of the confusion, Captain Mensa made her move. All hands, prepare for boarding action. She aimed her destroyer directly at the Dominion flagship, pushing through the damaged shields before they could recharge. We are going to teach them something their empire forgot a long time ago. There is no wall humans cannot break. Boarding pods launched from the Swift Vengeance, carrying Marines into the flagship's corridors. Fighting erupted throughout the massive vessel as humans engaged Dominion soldiers in close combat. It was brutal, bloody, and exactly the kind of battle humans had been fighting for thousands of years. The Dominion had not had to defend their own ships in centuries. They had forgotten how 0.4 hours after the battle began, Dravik ordered a retreat. 150 of his ships were destroyed or disabled. Another 200 were damaged. He had expected an easy victory. He had received a lesson in humility. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. This was not supposed to happen. Young species did not defeat the Dominion. Humanity had lost 60 ships, but their crews had ejected before destruction. Rescue operations were already bringing them home, alive and ready to fight again. One alien news commentator spoke what everyone was thinking. The humans are not fighting to survive. They are fighting to win. That is not the same thing at all. Dravik returned to the Dominion Command Center with rage burning in his eyes. His emperor met him with cold fury. You failed, the emperor stated. They fight without honor or form. They use tricks and traps. They sacrifice themselves like their lives mean nothing. Then stop fighting them like soldiers. The emperor handed Dravik a sealed order. Use the devastation protocol. If they will not surrender, they will not exist. Dravik read the order and felt something he had not felt in decades. Doubt. The devastation weapon was a planet killer. Forbidden by galactic law. Using it would prove to the galaxy that the Dominion was no different from the monsters they claimed to oppose. But orders were orders. Humanity had won the first battle. They did not know that the war was about to become much worse. Governor Patience Adeyemi had not slept in 3 days. Reports covered her desk like fallen leaves. Evacuation schedules. Defense preparations. Messages from families asking if they should stay or go. 50 million people looked to her for guidance, and she did not have easy answers to give them. New Mombasa was humanity's jewel. A beautiful world of green forests and blue oceans, carefully shaped over decades into a paradise. Children had been born here who had never known Earth. Families had grown old watching alien sunsets. This was not just a colony. This was home, and the Dominion was coming to destroy it. Admiral Anand's hologram flickered on her desk. Governor, our intelligence has confirmed the worst. They are bringing the devastation weapon. It is designed to crack planetary cores. Nothing can survive it. How long until they arrive? 72 hours. Patience closed her eyes. 72 hours to move 50 million people. Impossible. Even with every ship in the sector working constantly, they could only save perhaps half. We could begin emergency evacuation, Anand continued. Save as many as possible. And the rest? Patience opened her eyes. The families we leave behind? Do we tell them we tried our best while they watch our ships disappear? It would save some lives. It would break our souls. Patience stood and walked to her window. Outside, children were playing in a park, unaware that their world had less than 3 days to live. Admiral, if we run now, they will chase us forever. Every colony we build, they will threaten. Every world we love, they will use against us. We cannot run from this. We have to stand. Standing here means dying here. Maybe. Patience turned back to face the hologram. But dying on your feet is better than living on your knees. My grandmother taught me that. And her grandmother taught her. We come from a long line of people who refuse to bow. Anand was quiet for a moment. I cannot order civilians to stay. You will not have to. Patience smiled sadly. I will ask them, and I think you will be surprised by their answer. The message went out to every city, every town, every farm on New Mombasa. Governor Adeyemi spoke plainly, without false hope or empty promises. She explained the threat. She explained the odds. She explained that evacuation was possible but incomplete. Then she asked them to stay. The response came within hours. 90% chose to remain. Not because they did not understand the danger. They understood perfectly. They stayed because running meant abandoning their neighbors. Running meant telling the galaxy that humans would sacrifice each other to save themselves. Running meant becoming something they refused to be. While New Mombasa prepared for siege, Ambassador Yuki Okonkwo was fighting a different battle at the Galactic Assembly. The Dominion intends to use a weapon of mass destruction, she announced to the gathered representatives. A weapon that is forbidden by every treaty this body has ever signed. They will kill 50 million civilians because they could not beat our military. Silence. The same silence that always greeted Dominion victims. Yuki pressed forward. I have evidence that this is not the first time. The Kathrani species did not simply disappear 40 years ago. They were destroyed. The hollow of Ceres III is not a natural formation. It is the scar left by this weapon. The Dominion has been hiding genocide behind lies, and you have all been too afraid to look. More silence. But this time, something shifted. Representatives were glancing at each other. Some were checking their own records. The seed of doubt had been planted. Councillor Prill stood slowly. The Finari were pacifists, known throughout the galaxy for refusing to take sides in any conflict. They had not made a political statement in over a century. The Finari collective condemns the Solaran Dominion, Prill announced, his small voice carrying through the suddenly frozen chamber. We offer sanctuary to any human refugees and call upon all peaceful species to bear witness to what happens next. It was not military aid. The Finari had no weapons to offer, but it was something almost as valuable, legitimacy. If the pacifists were speaking against the Dominion, then the Dominion was clearly in the wrong. Other species began to move their ships toward New Mombasa. Not to fight, just to watch, to record, to ensure the galaxy saw what the Dominion truly was. 72 hours passed. The Dominion fleet appeared at the edge of the system. At its center hung the devastation weapon, a massive construct of metal and energy that pulsed with barely contained destruction. Around it, the rebuilt Dominion armada spread out like a swarm of predators. High Commander Dravik broadcast his final offer. Surrender your leaders for execution, and we will spare your population. This is mercy. Accept it. Admiral Anand's response was broadcast not just to the Dominion, but to every watching ship, every news network, every species that had gathered to witness this moment. We are humans, he said. We do not surrender our people. We do not abandon our worlds. And we do not forgive threats against our children. You want New Mombasa? Come and take it. We will make you pay for every inch in blood. The human fleet moved forward. Not retreating, not defending. Attacking, Dravik watched in disbelief. They were charging directly into his superior force. It was suicide. It was insanity that it was exactly what humans had always done when their backs were against the wall. Then the sensors screamed. Something massive had entered the system from the outer darkness. Something that had been hiding in the void for decades, waiting for this exact moment. The Dreadnought Defiance was 3 kilometers of human engineering, designed for one purpose: to tell the galaxy that humanity would never, ever surrender, and it had come to prove that promise. The Dreadnought Defiance was never meant to win the war alone. Admiral Anand knew this better than anyone. 3 kilometers of hull and weapons could hold a line, could inspire courage, could make enemies hesitate. But it could not defeat 800 warships by itself. That was not its purpose. All ships, form on the Defiance. Anand commanded from the Dreadnought's bridge. Today we show them what humans are made of. Across the system, scattered human vessels changed course. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and fighters moved together toward the massive ship like moths drawn to a flame. Alone, they had been running and hiding, striking from shadows. Together, behind their fortress, they became something else. They became an army. High Commander Dravik watched the human formation with growing unease. His fleet still outnumbered them significantly. His weapons were proven. His soldiers were experienced, yet something in his chest felt wrong. A sensation he had not experienced in decades. Fear. All ships, concentrate fire on the large vessel, he ordered. Destroy their symbol, and their morale will break. The Dominion fleet opened fire. Thousands of energy beams streaked across space, turning the void into a storm of light. The Defiance's shields flared under the assault, energy cascading across its surface like water on stone, but the shields held. Return fire, Anand said calmly. All batteries. The Defiance spoke with a voice of thunder. Weapons that had been designed and built in secret for 40 years unleashed their fury on the Dominion fleet. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds found themselves torn apart by technology they had never seen. While the giants clashed, Lieutenant Amara Diallo was executing her part of the plan. Hornet squadrons, move on the devastation weapon, she commanded. Target the power conduits. We do not need to destroy it. We just need to delay it. 12 squadrons of small, fast ships broke away from the main battle and dove toward the planet killer. The massive construct was charging, its core glowing brighter with each passing minute. When it reached full power, nothing would save New Mombasa. The Dominion tried to intercept them, but the Hornets were too fast, too small, too numerous. They slipped through defensive fire like rain through fingers, striking at exposed systems and vanishing before counterattacks could find them. Power conduits 3 and 7 destroyed, a pilot reported. Charging sequence interrupted. They are repairing, Diallo warned. We have maybe 20 minutes before they compensate. Someone needs to finish the job. Captain Bayo Mensa heard the call from her position near the edge of the battle. Her destroyer, the Swift Vengeance, had taken heavy damage. Half her crew was injured. Her engines were failing, but she was close to the devastation weapon. Close enough. All hands, prepare for boarding action, she announced. Marines to the pods. We are going in. Captain, the ship cannot survive another direct engagement. I know. Mensa's voice was steady. But that weapon can kill 50 million people. What is one ship against that? What are our lives against theirs? No one argued. They understood. The Swift Vengeance made its final charge, burning through space toward the devastation weapon. Dominion ships tried to intercept, but Mensa's crew fought with the desperation of people who knew they would not see tomorrow. They cleared a path through blood and fire. Boarding pods launched. Marines breached the weapon's hull and fought their way through corridors designed for beings much larger than humans. They moved fast, brutal, unstoppable, driven by something deeper than training. Mensa led from the front. She had always led from the front. They reached the core chamber. The heart of the weapon pulsed with energy, preparing to unleash destruction that would crack a world. Around it, Dominion engineers worked frantically to complete the charging sequence. Set the charges, Mensa ordered. Everyone out. Her Marines obeyed, planting explosives on the critical systems. But as they prepared to retreat, Mensa checked the timers and realized the truth. The detonation window is too short, she said quietly. Someone needs to trigger manually. Captain, no. Go. She pushed her lieutenant toward the exit. Tell them we held the line. Tell them we did not break. Now move. They ran. She stayed. The explosion tore through the devastation weapon from within. Fire consumed the core, spreading outward in a chain reaction that could not be stopped. The most powerful weapon in the Dominion arsenal died in a burst of light that was visible from New Mombasa's surface. Captain Bayo Mensa's last transmission was heard by every human ship in the system. Tell them we held the line. The shockwave from the explosion damaged both fleets, but the psychological impact was entirely one-sided. The Dominion had lost their greatest weapon, their symbol of power, their promise of inevitable victory. High Commander Dravik stared at the expanding debris field and felt something break inside him. Not his courage, something else. His certainty. For his entire life, he had believed the Dominion was right. That conquest was justice. That the strong deserved to rule the weak. But watching one human sacrifice herself to save millions of strangers, he understood something terrible. The humans were not weak. They were the strongest species he had ever encountered. Because true strength was not about what you could destroy, it was about what you were willing to die for. Speaker Morth appeared at his side. Commander, the Emperor demands we continue the attack. Dravik was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke words that no Dominion officer had ever said. "No, Commander. Transmit a ceasefire request to the human flagship." Dravik turned away from the viewport. "This war is over." The Emperor's response was immediate and furious. He ordered Dravik to continue fighting or be executed for treason. Dravik refused again, and across the Dominion fleet, something unprecedented happened. Other commanders began refusing too. They had seen what the humans were willing to sacrifice. They had seen what real courage looked like, and they were ashamed of what they had become. The Battle of New Mombasa ended not with human victory, but with Dominion mutiny. An empire that had conquered dozens of species was broken by one woman who chose to die rather than let innocent people burn out on the surface of New Mombasa. 50 million humans looked up at the sky and wept. They had survived, and they would never forget the price that was paid. 3 months after the Battle of New Mombasa, the Galactic Assembly gathered for the most important session in its history. Representatives from over 200 species filled the chamber, but the atmosphere was nothing like before. The silence of fear had been replaced by something else. Hope. Ambassador Yuki Okonkwo stood at the central podium where High Commander Dravik had once issued his ultimatum. She was older now, worn by months of war and diplomacy. But her voice was strong, and her eyes held the same calm fire that had shocked the galaxy on that first day. "The Solaran Dominion no longer exists as we knew it," she announced. "The Emperor has been deposed by his own people. The military that once conquered worlds now guards borders instead of crossing them. Former Dominion territories have declared independence or joined peaceful coalitions." She paused, letting the words settle over the assembly. "This was not our doing alone. We did not defeat an empire. We inspired others to defeat themselves. The soldiers who stopped fighting did so because they chose to. The species who rose against their conquerors did so because they found their courage. We simply reminded the galaxy what courage looks like." In the gallery, former High Commander Dravik sat in chains, waiting for judgment. A war crimes tribunal had been assembled, with representatives from species that had suffered under Dominion rule demanding execution. Dravik had accepted this calmly. He had given the orders. He deserved the consequences. But then Okonkwo spoke again. "The prosecution has called for death. Many would consider this justice. I would ask the tribunal to consider something else." She looked directly at Dravik. "This man ordered the deaths of millions. But this man also ended a war by refusing to continue it. He defied his emperor when no one else would. He chose conscience over obedience." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "Justice is not revenge," Okonkwo continued. "We fought to protect our people, not to become the monsters we defeated. If we execute everyone who followed evil orders, we teach the galaxy that change is impossible, that once you are an enemy, you are always an enemy, that redemption does not exist." She turned to face the tribunal judges. "I ask for exile instead of execution. Let him spend his remaining years documenting what happened. Let him warn other empires of the cost of conquest. Let him live as proof that even the worst of us can choose differently." The tribunal deliberated for 3 days. In the end, they chose exile. Dravik was sent to a distant world where he would live out his years alone, writing the history of the war and the fall of his empire. His final words to the tribunal were simple. "I do not deserve mercy, but I am grateful for it, and I will spend every remaining day trying to understand why you gave it." The galaxy changed quickly after that. New treaties were signed. The Galactic Assembly created laws against weapons of mass destruction, with enforcement mechanisms that actually worked. Species that had lived in fear for centuries began to build new futures, and humanity was offered something unprecedented: a permanent seat on the Security Council. Okonkwo accepted with one condition. "The seat will rotate among human nations," she explained. "We do not speak with one voice, and we never will. We argue, we disagree, we compete. That is our nature. But when something threatens what we love, we find unity in our diversity. That is our strength." The assembly agreed. They were beginning to understand that human contradictions were not weakness. They were powered out on New Mombasa. The rebuilding was nearly complete. Cities that had prepared for destruction now prepared for celebration. Parks that had emptied for evacuation filled again with families and children. In the central square of the capital, a memorial had been constructed. A wall of names listed every human who had died in the war. At its center stood a statue of Captain Bayo Mensa, her face looking upward toward the stars she had died protecting. Beneath the statue, her final words were carved in stone. We held the line. Governor Patience Adeyemi visited the memorial every morning. She had known Mensa before the war. They had shared meals, traded stories, laughed together at diplomatic functions where they both felt out of place. Now one of them was dead and the other was alive. And that simple fact weighed heavier than any victory. Was it worth it? A reporter asked her once. All the death, all the sacrifice. Adeyemi considered the question carefully. Ask the children who will grow up free. Ask the families who will never know fear. Ask the species across the galaxy who found their courage because we found ours. She looked at the statue. Ask Bayo if you could. I think I know what she would say. Admiral Ravi Anand did not attend ceremonies. He did not give speeches or accept medals. Instead, he visited the memorial alone, late at night. When no one else was watching, he was standing there one evening when a small figure approached. A Solaran child, scales still soft with youth. Part of a refugee family that had fled the Dominion's collapse. The child looked up at the wall of names with confusion. Why are there so many? The child asked. Anand knelt to meet the child's eyes. Because we lost them protecting what we love. But why did you protect us? The child's confusion was genuine. You were enemies. You could have destroyed us after you won. Other empires always do. Anand was quiet for a moment. Behind the child, her parent watched with obvious fear, ready to apologize for the interruption, ready to pull the child away from the human admiral. Being strong is not about what you can destroy, Anand said finally. It is about what you can protect, even our enemies' children. He stood and walked away, leaving the child staring after him. The parent hurried forward, taking the child's hand, still frightened but also confused. They had been taught that humans were monsters. Yet this monster had spoken to a Solaran child with gentleness. Perhaps the universe was not what they had been told. That I in the square, as the sun rose over New Mombasa, children of a dozen different species played together. Human children chased Finari children. Solaran children built towers with building blocks alongside others who had never seen scales before. Laughter filled the air, bright and pure, the sound of a future being born. The galaxy had feared humans would conquer them. They had prepared for the worst kind of enemy, the kind that burned worlds and enslaved populations. They never expected humans would free them instead. And perhaps that was humanity's greatest victory. Not the battles they won or the enemies they defeated, but the universe they created when the fighting was done. A universe where former enemies became friends. Where children played together without fear. Where mercy was valued more than vengeance. That a universe that finally understood what humans had known all along. The strongest force in existence is not destruction, that it is hope.